Alright guys, did a video here a minute ago on tearing down a Winchester 1300. Now we're going to break down one of these 870s. First, I guess I didn't say this in the last video, make sure it's empty. Don't work on a loaded gun. If you're not smart enough to not work on a loaded gun, you shouldn't be taking guns apart. First thing we're going to do is take the barrel off. I do that with the action open. I know a bunch of people say not to. I do for a certain reason. Going to remove this end cap here. It can be under spring pressure, especially if your little capture tube thing isn't locked right to capture that spring. Mine is. If you need to get that out, you simply push it in, turn it a half turn, quarter turn, and it'll pop out. Pull our barrel forward and it rolls off. Off comes the barrel. Like I said in the last video, if you ain't smart enough to take a barrel off shotgun, you shouldn't even be considering taking the action out. Alright, now they're going to lock our bolt back. That is too far forward. You can see I can get my finger in behind the firing pin, or the bolt carrier. That's too far forward. It should be about where it is when it's normally closed. Now, you got two pins. I was told by a gunsmith a long time ago that you need to be bolt down to take these pins out. I don't know if that is true. I don't know if it's not. I do know the gun needs to be cocked. That's why I take the barrel off the action down. Now I know it's cocked. You can do this with just about anything. I'm just going to use a pair of needle nose pliers here for giving a little bump. Alright, good bump. That one's stiff. It's a new gun. I don't know that it's ever been apart. Not like holding up on there, you know? There it went. Like I said, brand new gun. Everything's good and tight on it. Alright, now we're going to pull those pins out. I'm going to put a little rag here, keep from marring up this stock, or marring up the finish. Just give it a good pull up. Depending on how pretty your gun is how careful you want to be as far as putting metal up against your other metal. Once it's been taken apart a couple times, guys, these things just pop out. Will caution you though, when you got new spring, don't be gouging on them to the point where you tear stuff up. If you can't get them out, punch them all the way out. From here, we're just going to grab our trigger group, pull it out. A lot like the 1300 was. Okay. Now, as you can see, trigger group's out. Here is the rest of our action, so on and so forth. Talk about trigger group for a minute. You can clean everything you need to clean from right here. I would not recommend taking your trigger group apart unless you truly know what you're doing. I don't see a need for it, honestly. You can get to everything right there. Put a drop of oil wherever you need to. Don't over oil those. That's probably a common problem I see. Now, the only difference between 870 and that 1300 is 1300 you just pull the action forward and the bolt pops out. With the 870, what you got to do first is there's two springs in here, one on either side. You got to push in on one spring, and that one just kind of popped apart. Push in on the one spring and everything will slide forward. Put that back together so you didn't see that. Now we can take our pump tube off with our pump bars, and we've got a completely open action, or open receiver now. There is a spring in here you need to mind. It is pinned, but I've seen some where that lug has been worn off on older guns and that spring just kind of falls off. Spring right here. There. Turn my light back on. Let there be light. This spring's right here. Let's see but you need to mind it. Okay, now we got that off. Set this to the side. You can clean down in there all good and dandy and all that. The bolt, this floor plate on the bolt of the 870 just falls off. It's actually not impossible to put it in backwards. It is, however, important that it does not go in backwards. So, bearing that in mind, I guess the best way to put it is the thick end goes forward. Actually, you'll see on your carrier, if your plates are big enough, it only fit in there one way. As you can see, the big end is forward of the gun. If you try to put it backwards, it won't set, it won't ride. So the big end goes forward of the bolt, the big thick end right here. Now, I don't feel a need to take the bolt apart to clean this one. You can. You simply, there are two pins that have to be, or I'm sorry, one pin that really has to be punched out. And that is this pin right here. That one right there. Now, it's under a lot of spring pressure in a couple of different places. Part of it captures the firing pin, and the other part the other thing it does is hold the extractor in place. I don't suggest taking this apart unless you truly know what you're doing. I'm not going to take it apart for the sake of the video, because honestly, I'm not that good at it. I've lost springs out of these things before working on these club guns for the 4H. It's just, you gotta hold everything in your teeth and your mouth and your nose just right to get this apart, and more to the point, back together without losing any parts. So I don't suggest doing it unless you truly, have a broken spring issue. If I had spare parts here, this is a club gun, like I said. If I had spare parts here, I would consider taking this apart right now. But honestly, if I lose one, my kids shoot this afternoon, my 4-H kids shoot this afternoon, and we'd be down a gun, so I'm not going to do that for this reason. You can clean everything you need to clean in that bolt right here. Blow air in it, whatever you need to do. So that's as far as I'm going to take that down, and that's it. From here, you can clean the hell out of this thing. If you have a need to take it down any further than this, if you are not comfortable with punching that pin out and figuring it out, and possibly losing a part, or don't understand how that would work, you need to take it to gunsmith anyway. But now we're going to put it back together real quick with our bolt and our bolt carrier. There's actually no way to get this wrong. How this works, just so you know, all this plate does, I've heard a whole bunch of stories of how this works. What this plate does is when the action's locked completely forward, it rolls this pin up, this lug up, and that's your locking lug. That locks the chamber tight. Locks the bolt into the chamber so it's ready to fire. As it pumps back, that drops out of the way, allows the bolt to move backwards. So it's for. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and put that back in the receiver. All we do to do that is, this is a lot easier when you're not trying to hold it so somebody can see it. We're going to start our pump back in here. Okay. When you get it to right there, all you got to do is handy dandy set your bolt on top of that rail. Okay. There's channels that they'll fit in. Once you get it started, we're sure everything's right and lined up. Once you get it started, same thing going in, coming out. You can get it started a little bit, but you're going to have to press one of these little springs here Alright, I apologize. This is really tough when you're trying to hold it where you guys can see it. There's little channels to get it started in there. Once you get them started, press in on Mr. Spring over here. I apologize, I can't do this under that camera. Alright, one more time. Start Mr. Pump. And as I said, this gun is brandy new, so all the tolerances are real tight on it, which is a good thing. It's just not wore in yet. Alright. There we go. Alright. You have to... Alright, these springs right here. They're going to be tough to see. They are the same springs that allow your magazine out, to allow rounds out of your magazine tube. You have to get it past them first. Honestly, on some of my older club guns that have really had a workout in their lifetime, it just slaps in there. This gun, which I guess I should have picked a club gun, is not near as easy. So, at the risk of doing this, so you guys can't see it, I'm trying to do it straight up. I can't turn it over because the bolt's going to fall out. You got to push it back till it stops. Okay, it stops right there. Now, I've got to, one at a time, push. Let's see if I can get it turned over and not lose it. One at a time, I have to push these springs to the side. I can't do it upside down, I'm sorry guys. I'm going to have to do this out of camera view. What I'm going to do is I tuck this under, when I do this, I tuck this under my arm. I get the carrier on top, the shotgun arms right where they need to be. Let's see, try and do this where you guys can see it. And from here, you just got to reach up, get hold of them, both them cups. Make sure the bolt's where it needs to be. Get hold of both them springs and push them one at a time in. The chamber side usually goes first, or the ejection port side, and then the inside one. They're just a little, one's a little bit further than the last one. But then you pull it all the way back. Apologize for that taking so long. This is a brand new tight gun. Alright, so now we're going to slide, again, same way on the 1300. We're going to slide the bolt not too far forward, not too far back, where you can see air in there. Just right where it would be in a normal world, which is right there. Now, unlike the 1300, you got to kind of go down and then go back. You sort of kind of do on this, but not near as, it's not near as problematic getting them lined up because this is a twin pin system and not a single pin. Alright, as our pins went in out from this side, and you gotta kind of play with this thing to get it lined up just pretty. But we're gonna go back in from the chamber side, or the ejection port side. Big pin in first, And now our little pin. If you have something like a small screwdriver to line up those holes, that kind of makes life a little bit easier. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. Get it started down in there. Rubber mallet, rubberized handle on. This thing helps. Come on. It's not lined up. Aha, it isn't lined up. There, now she's lined up. Same thing applies as with all other items. The minute you start thinking you're hitting it too hard that you might hurt it, you are. Stop. In that case, there was a piece of sheet metal that was holding that pin from coming all the way through. I hit it 3 or 4 good times, loose in my hand, where as I hit it, if it hurt it, it would push the deal over, or push the striking tool over, as opposed to exerting too much force on that pin. You should never, don't get me wrong, this pin shouldn't be falling out, but you should never have to beat it down in there. If you have to beat it down in there, there's something wrong. From there, open your action, take your barrel, slide the barrel back in and on. Come on. There we go. Till them protrude, find our cap. Alright. There we go. Go back to wide. That is wide. Alright. Now to do a function check, do that the same way you do it on any other gun. What we're going to do is ensure we're empty, cock the gun, defeat the safety, press and hold the trigger to the rear, you should hear the hammer fall. Press and hold the trigger to the rear, you should hear the hammer fall. Once that happens, holding the trigger to the rear, don't let off, hold it to the rear, cycle it. Now when you let off the trigger, you should hear a metallic click, like that. That was the sear resetting. Now when you pull the trigger, it should fire. Just like so. That means we're good to go. Alright, that's kind of quickie on how to take down an 870. I would like to address another issue, come to think of it, that they've been having with these 870s. The newer ones, apparently the quality control at Remington is not the greatest right now, and some of these, especially the 870 Expresses, which is what we're getting for club guns for 4H, are having ejection issues, not extraction. The difference between an extractor and an ejector: the extractor extracts the bullet from the chamber. I'll show you here. Okay. This is the extractor. It extracts the spent casing from the chamber. The ejector is actually the spring right here. That is the ejector. When that casing comes back and hits that spring, it pushes forward on it and throws it out of the gun. From what I can tell, guys, this is truly a cheap ammunition / manufacturing issue. There are tons and tons of guns doing it. I'm going to do a video on how to correct it. It's very easily corrected with a drill and a bore brush, and we'll get into how to do that later. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to take a drill and a bore brush and some very fine steel wool, coat it in oil, and run it in a chamber. Just spin it in your chamber for a little bit. Clean the bore, put a shell in it, run a couple shells through it, see if it solves it. If it didn't, give it a little bit more. What's the problem is the chambering's just a little bit too tight of tolerances for these cheap shells. Seems to be what's solving the issue. Shotgun's not like a rifle. The chamber tolerances are not micro precision. You can allow, and actually is needed, a little bit of play in there for the shell to do what it needs to do. That seems to be curing the ejection problems on the 870s. These new club guns I'm getting. The The other thing you can do is change ammunition. We're having a lot of problems with them with that cheap bulk Winchester birdshot, which unfortunately is what the NRA sent us this year to shoot for the club skeet. So, for the kids. So, you know, it truly is now. That's what we got to work with. You can work the gun as they break in. They work a little better too, but you can quicken the break-in period. Like I said, take a bore brush, wrap it very thinly in steel wool. Not you don't need to hammer it down into the barrel. Just a good thin wrap of steel wool. Put it in the end of a drill. Oil the hell out of it first, so it's good and oily, and just bzzz. I've found about between 1 and 1.5 minutes seems of just spinning it and running up and down a little bit. Seems to be perfect. 2 minutes didn't hurt the gun, but it felt a little bit looser. But what you're going to do, I think personally, and I don't know this for a fact, and I'm not telling anybody to modify your guns. If you ain't comfortable with this, don't do it. I am comfortable with working on guns, and I don't have a problem if I jack up a barrel buying another barrel. If I jack up a barrel, I'm going to take money out of my pocket and buy a new barrel for that club gun. So I'm not worried about tearing it up. If I tear it up, I can get another one. Now, that being said, if you are not comfortable with doing that, take it to a licensed gunsmith. Let them figure out what they're doing. I'm just telling you, if you Google Remington 870 extract or ejection problem, this is a common occurrence, and I got that idea from Google. I didn't invent this myself. I've heard a bunch of people on Google say they were doing this. Go check it out, and I started doing it, and it solved the problem. So that's one thing you can do to break that gun in, help it break the break-in period. I've seen somebody else say take that ejector and bend it out. I wouldn't do that. That thing is staked in there very lightly. I just wouldn't do that. If you're into bending the springs on your guns, knock yourself out. I'm not thinking that's a good idea. Anyway, there you go. That's how you tear down an 870. Said in the last video, do yourself a favor, join the NRA. If you're into the shooting sports in any way, shape, or form, we need your help. The day they come and take our guns away and everybody goes, oh my God, how'd they do that? How they're going to do that is from the NRA not having enough support and not having enough funds to fight stuff. So join the NRA if you're not a member of the NRA. We need your help. If you are a member or a lifetime member like I am, I still send them money anyway every year. So anyway, appreciate you watching. Any questions or comments, feel free. Thumbs up, subscribe, tell your friends and your neighbors and your dogs and everybody else. Check out my videos. I sure do appreciate it. And you guys have a good day.